my King.
To me, Jesus is a safe place, a place to be known for all of your flaws and who you truly are, and to be loved and accepted anyway.
Yeah. Good answer, honey.
Who is Jesus to me? Jesus is my foundation. Everything that I do in my life revolves around him, to a point to I ask myself, is this something that Jesus would do? So who is Jesus to me? Jesus is my rock.
Let's jump into Who is Jesus? Second session here. Hope you've been enjoying your connection groups. If you've been a part of that, there's a lot of folks in them. If you still want to be a part of a connection group, maybe you're not part of one yet, but you want to get more out of what's being talked about on Sunday morning, please let me know. Tim at welcomewesleyan.com, office at welcomewesleyan.com. Snag me by the door, chase me down, tackle me. Whatever you got to do. Love for you to be involved. Don't tackle me too hard, okay? Especially you, right? Okay. So anyway, back in 2008, right? 2008, long time ago, right? My wife Ashley and I went on our first date, right? It was kind of a setup. Like, I knew who she was. Like, it was a blind date, but it wasn't a blind date. My dad really kind of had a hand in putting us together, and so we went out together to the Upper Peninsula or the UP State Fair, where she took me on 3 rides. You guys like amusement park rides, right? Amusement park rides. So she took me on 3 rides. This is a carnival, so it's not quite like Magnum Force or anything like that. But there's this ride called the Scrambler. You guys familiar with the Scrambler? How many of you guys like the Scrambler? Okay, right? Yeah. So this ride goes like this, right? And then you're in these little carts that spin as well. So we're like going around and we're spinning and it's crazy and we're having fun. And then we go on our next ride, and it's the hang glider ride. I don't know what the name is. It's like you're in these hang gliders, right? And you go up and then down. It's shaped like a hang glider. You lay on your stomach, and usually there's a couple of you next to each other. And this ride looks cool, so we're going on this ride, and so we're going like diagonals, like circles up and down, and I'm like, my stomach's starting to feel a little funny. So we go like this, and then we go like this, and then she takes me on the zipper, all right? Now, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the zipper, but it's like this giant arm with 2 carts at each end, and then it flips end over end, and then you're in the carts, and those carts are flipping too, right? So I went this way, I went this way, and then I went this way, all right? And at first, I was really excited to be here at the fair with this beautiful young woman who's like way out of my league, right? And I've got butterflies in my stomach, but then after I go this way, and this way, and this way, my butterflies turn to bats, right? And I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. This isn't fun. This is a bad date, okay? I went to a bench, and I sat down on that bench with my head hanging over my knees and just tried to keep the contents of my stomach from falling all out on the ground in front of this beautiful young lady. I mean, I was like, this is a bad date. Like, if I can think of a date, this is not the date I want to be. I'm about to lose my cookies, right? These bats are going to be like, they're going to come everywhere. And, even though I thought it was bad, we shut the fair down. I mean, we stayed there until it closed. And then afterwards, we went out and found a restaurant that was still open and grabbed a bite to eat. And then we did it all over again together the next day. It was like, this is a good date, right? Now, Ashley and I lived 6.5 hours away from each other. So I was out visiting my parents. I got set up to go on this crazy date, not expecting anything. And we leave, and the next day when we leave, man, there's just something about this girl that's different. And no joke, guys. Don't think I'm a wimp, all right? But I cried. Like when I left the next day, I'm on my way home and I'm listening to like Relient K. This is the best thing that could be happening. And like I'm jamming to this music and I'm like, why am I leaking? You know, I got these tears coming out of my eyes. And I drive home and I know there's something special about Ashley. And so for the next, for the next months, I mean, we are talking on the phone like every day. And then, you know, at first you're like, I like you a lot. And then it went from like to the, you know, the other L word, right? Love, right? I love you, right? And so, you know, we're talking to each other. And I remember the day that I called her on the phone and I heard her voice and we're chatting and we're talking. And I said, I want to express my love. And I was just, you know, honey, I love you so much. And she said, I don't love you. And I was like, oh, like that hurt. Like, take a knife, stick it in my guts, give it a twist. I was like, don't say that. Don't say that. That's not funny. That's not a joke. I love you. And she says, I don't love you. And I was like, listen, okay, once was funny, now it is not funny anymore. You have said this to me before. I have said it to you. I love you. I know I love you. I know you love me. Stop playing around. I love you. I need you to say it to me. And she goes, but I don't love you. This isn't Ashley. This is Amber. It's her twin sister on the phone. And the whole time, I'm having this conversation, longing for her affection, longing for her love, for her to speak to me and say these words. But it wasn't who I thought it was. It was a case of mistaken identity. And I don't know if you've had this happen before. Maybe you were a little kid and you ran up to a familiar pair of legs and you were just like, ah, right? And then you look up and you're like, who are you? You know, it's like, it's not your mom or your dad or who you thought it was. Or maybe as an adult or an older person or a college student, you know, you were standing there and like all of a sudden some little kid like presses into the back of you and you're like, what's going on? And you turn around and you look down and you're like, I'm not your mom. And they're like, you're not my mom. And then they walk away, they're kind of freaked out. Or maybe you've been in the grocery store and like somebody walks up to you and they're like, excuse me, ma'am, can you tell me a little bit more about this and which is the best kind to get? And you look at them and they look at you and you're like, I don't work here. And they're like, oh, oops, my bad, you know? Or maybe you've done that to somebody else. You've gone up and you're like, hey, can you tell me where this is? You know, I'm looking for this kind of cereal and it doesn't seem to be over in this section. Maybe it's in another, and they're looking at you and they're like, I don't work here, you know? Maybe you've had that experience. And sometimes I think that happens with God. I think it happens with God. I think like people have different upbringings and expectations and life experiences, good or bad, and sometimes those experiences or expectations cause them to see God a certain way. Good or bad. Just they cause confusion about who God is, about what he is really like. And in my experience, you know, I've seen this happen a lot. Like when folks read about a terrible event in the Bible or in history, and then they use that one instance to like frame who God is to them. Or they take, you know, maybe something bad that has happened in their life, and they project that onto God and say, well, that must be who God is or what he is like. And you know, reality is this is a struggle that human beings have had since the very beginning, right? We've always had this pondering question, like, if there is a God, what is he like? How can I know him? Like, know what he's like beyond just my expectations, beyond just my experiences or my own understanding or my own projections. Such was the case with a man named Philip, who'd been following Jesus for several years. And in a conversation with Jesus recorded in John's account, chapter 14, verse 8, Philip said to Jesus, he said, Lord, show us the Father. It's a reference to God. Jesus, show us the Father. Show us what God is like. That'll be enough for us. And Jesus answers Philip and he says, Philip, don't you know me? Don't you know me, Philip, even after I have been among you for such a long time? Philip, we've been hanging out, man. We've been having conversations. You know, I've taught you all these wonderful things about life. You've witnessed like people being healed. You've witnessed the blind being given sight. You've witnessed like deaf people hearing. Philip, you saw me raise somebody from the dead. Remember we were out in that boat, right? And I was up front sleeping, taking a nap, and you guys were all like, we're going to die. Philip, what'd I do? I got up. I said, be quiet. And like the storm just went away. Philip, don't you know? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. Which really helps not only Philip, but also us understand that when we understand who Jesus is, when we understand what Jesus is like, we get an accurate picture of God. We learn what God is like. Or let's phrase it this way. If we want to understand what God is like, all we have to do is look at Jesus. Look at how he lives and what he says, because Jesus shows us what God is like. And so if that's the case, answering this question, who is Jesus or what is Jesus like, is really important for us to get right. If we're going to have a correct understanding of who God is, a correct theology of who God is, because that will speak directly to the meaning and purpose of life that impacts our fulfillment that we find in it. We're going to want to know what Jesus is like. What God is like. Not the misconceptions out there or the mistaken identities, but really, what is Jesus like? And to do that today, I want to take a look at Luke chapter 15, verses 1 to 10. You can turn there in your word. If you have that with you, you can throw your eyes up on the screen. You can find it on your electronic device, I'm sure. But Luke chapter 15, verses 1 to 10, we encounter two really important conversations Jesus has with the religious leaders and people gathered around him. And the context really helps set the stage. That's what we're going to look at first. And the scriptures say here, it says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. And you have to understand, in that day, the tax collectors were probably some of the people of the Jews, and they would collect money from their fellow Jews for the Romans, and they would usually collect more than what they actually owed. They would kind of extort them type thing. And so the tax collectors were kind of perceived as like traitors, right? So like tax collectors like traitor, right? And so he's like, they're gathering around to hear Jesus, and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law mutter, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. And from the context and knowing the history of the Pharisees, I just got to be honest with you, this isn't a positive statement. Okay? They're not saying, look, Jesus welcomes tax collectors and sinners. Yeah! No. That's not what we're reading here. Rather, this is a derogatory comment. It says it's muttered. Right? You know what muttering is. It's like when your parents are like, hey, go take out the trash. Or when your boss is like, you got to stay after work. And you're like, you know. That's muttering. I can't believe this man welcomes sinners and eats with them, because they've noticed there's something about him. There's something about Jesus. He teaches with authority. He's done these amazing wonders, these things that nobody else can do. There's rumblings that he might be the Messiah. He might be the king that we've been looking for. But look who he hangs out with. Look who he's eating with. He hangs out with sinners and tax collectors, sinners and traitors to the Jewish people. Man, look at who he's hanging out with. And while the tax collectors and sinners seem to be receiving Jesus with joy, the Pharisees and the religious leaders, they're skeptical. They're jealous. Jesus shouldn't be spending time with them. He should be spending time with them. Look at these kinds of, look at their reputations. We're called to be a special people. Surely Jesus should know that if he is this teacher, if he is this Messiah, this king. Surely he should know that we're called to be a special people. We're called to be a holy people. I mean, how can this be? But look at what the investigative journalist Luke describes about Jesus as he's writing here. He quotes the religious leaders. Jesus welcomes sinners and eats with them. Man, this is the heart of God. We have to get this right. Jesus welcomes imperfect people. Jesus welcomes imperfect people who maybe don't quite have it all together. People who are maybe their lives are a little messy, or don't quite look like what we think they ought to look like. Jesus welcomes imperfect people. I remember growing up, our youth group went in and spent one time on a Wednesday, a summer evening, with another youth group that wasn't too far away. We had this combined event. It was called Mud Bowl. And there was these folks who had an outdoor riding arena. And the local fire department came over and got one of their big fire hoses and just soaked this outdoor riding pen, this riding arena, just drenched it down this deep in mud and like water. And I mean, it was just disgusting, right? And we all showed up at this property. We took our shoes off. And we went out there, and we were going to have some fun. But, when we first go out there, it's like you just kind of only want to get dirty from, your knees down or your waist. You don't really want it on your hands or on your face. I mean, that'd be disgusting. That's gross, right? But we go out there, and, youth pastors, they come up with these crazy games. And we go out there, and we play stuff like army crawl under these different obstacles. And now we're down in the mud, right? And then we'd play like keep away or something like that, or we do wheelbarrow races and we'd play pyramid football and then suddenly we get dirty and then it's like it's no big deal anymore. And by the end of the night, we're running as fast as we can, and we're diving on our bellies, seeing how far we can slide, right? And somebody takes mud and is like, whop, and they smack you on the head, and it's all in your hair, and it's caked in your ears, and you're just like, ah! And we're having a good old time, and then at the end of the night, the parents show up. They're like, I don't know how you're getting home, right? You ain't getting in my car. And so what do? We got this water hose. Trinkle, trinkle, trinkle. I was like, you don't need a water hose. You need a fire hose. And so we're just filthy, dirty. We're like, well, how are we going to get clean? And so, we load up into the, the nasty old church van, and we load up into the back of pickup trucks, and we load up into the horse trailer, and we all go down to the lake, and there's kids piling out of the back of these vehicles into the lake, and we're all in the lake, and we're covered in head to toe in this mud, and we're washing it off and trying to get somewhat clean. And finally, when we're somewhat clean, right, then the parents will lay down a towel on their seat, right, and get that just right, tucked in just so. And then you can get into the vehicle, but don't touch anything, right? Keep your hands in your lap, Don't touch anything. You're messy. You're dirty. And I don't know if, I don't know if I'm the only one, but like sometimes, you know, my kids are outside and they're running around and man, they're wearing their flip-flops or their sandals and their feet just turn red or black and their hands get red or black or their faces get red or black because they've been jumping on the trampoline and it's coming off on them, or they've been playing in the dirt and catching frogs and toads and digging up worms. My kids like literally went down when it rained one time. They walked down the road and like we're just picking up like handfuls of worms, just walking down the road. They come back, look at all these worms, right? I was like, what do we can do with all them worms, right? Sometimes it's just like, you know what? Before you guys come inside, you need to clean up. You need to go wash your hands. You need to do something. Don't come in this house. Clean up. Take your shoes off. Or they get inside the house. Don't touch anything. Go to the bathroom. Wash your hands. Don't put your hand on the wall because then there'll be a permanent handprint on the wall. Don't go by the couch. Don't do anything. Go clean up first. And yet we're human beings, often tend to avoid the messy things of life or the messiness of life. Jesus didn't. Jesus didn't. Instead, in his perfection, he submitted to the Father. He chose to enter into our imperfection, our brokenness, our mess, our dirt, welcoming us and joining us just where we are. Right? Aren't you thankful for that this morning? And that leaves us with two incredible implications. If you're like me, if you're not perfect or your life is less than, then you're in the right place. That's the first. If your life is messed up, if it's broken, if it's less than, if you're a little bit messy, if expectations quite aren't up to par, you're in the right place. You're in the right place because Jesus welcomes imperfect people. This is what we're reading here in this text. In fact, it reminds me of the church I did my internship at years ago, where we had this sign posted outside our youth group that said, "No perfect people allowed." I'm not sure if you've ever met any perfect people. I don't think I've met perfect people. I've met some people who think they're perfect, right? Who think they have it all together, but I've never met anyone perfect. All of us, every one of us is a work in progress. Nobody has arrived, which I don't know about you, but I find that incredibly comforting, right? I don't have to have it all together. I don't have to be perfect. The pressure is off. Because Jesus welcomes imperfect people. And the beautiful thing is, he doesn't leave us there either. Right? He takes what is messed up, what is broken, what is less than, whatever your perception of that might be, and he makes it whole. He makes it beautiful. That's what he does. So I'm thankful for that, and I hope it allows us to be honest with each other, right? Like, we don't have to pretend. We can be honest. My life is not what it looks like. Let's be honest about that. But then our second implication here is, if Jesus welcomes imperfect people, we should too. If Jesus welcomes imperfect people, we should too. And I don't know if we're all aware of this or not. If you're going to fish, you got to get messy. I don't know about you, but when I go fishing, I don't wear this. These aren't my fishing clothes. I don't wear this when I go fishing. Because when I go fishing, I get in my boat, and then I got to put my worm on. And like that requires that I dig down into this like dirty tub of slime where I pull out these worms and I stick them on the hook. And usually when I stick them on the hook, something comes out of them, and that gets all over my hands. And then I've got dirt and worm guts on my hands. And then like I usually not smart enough to bring a towel, so then I'm like, wiping them on my pants and on my shirt and getting my hands somewhat unslimy. And then I catch a fish, right? Ain't nobody going to take my fish off, right? I'm a 37-year-old dude. Nobody ain't taking my fish off. I better take my own fish off. And so I reach on and I grab that thing, and it's slimy, it's nasty, it's got spikes on its back, and now I'm bleeding, so I got blood and fish slime, and I'm taking my hook out, which got worm guts all over it, right? So I'm fishing. I'm doing this more than once, and I got fish guts, I got worm, and slime all over my hands, and, I'm wiping them on myself. And I go home, and I'm like, oh, that stinks. And I wash my hands, I get them all clean, and I go, oh, that stinks. Because the scent is still on there, right? It hasn't gone away yet. And it was Jesus who called his followers to fish. It was Jesus who called his followers to go into the mess, to go into the less than situations, the imperfect situations, the difficult situations. Right? If you're going to minister to people, it's going to be messy. Because people are messy. We're messy. In fact, let's just say that together, right? I'm messy. Can you say it with me? I'm messy. Yeah, it's true. Our lives are a bit of a mess. We're not called to isolate ourselves from the mess. We're called to go into it. And again, Jesus has this way of making that mess beautiful. So let's not be afraid of the mess. But then I love the stories he goes in to talk about, these parables in verse 3. And just to remind us, a parable is a story with a lesson. A parable is a story with a lesson. It's a story with a point. And so these aren't just like entertainment stories that Jesus is telling here. Jesus is actually trying to teach us something. And he starts off in verse 3. Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And then when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home, and he calls his friends and neighbors together He calls his friends and neighbors together to join him and say, rejoice, I found my lost sheep. I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner, one person who doesn't know Jesus, who repents or turns away from living life their own way and begins to live life Jesus' way. There'll be more rejoicing over one person who does that than 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent or turn to Jesus. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And then when she finds it, right, she calls her friends, Hey, I found my coin, right? Rejoice with me. Celebrate with me. In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner, one person who doesn't know Jesus, who turns away from doing life their way and begins doing life Jesus' way, who repents. And there's just a couple of key things here that we see presented in both stories that tell us what Jesus is like. Not only does he welcome imperfect people, but in these two stories we see a little bit more. Like when something is lost, like a single sheep, right? Or a single silver coin that seems of little or no value compared to the rest, right? We still got 99 sheep. We lost one, but we still got 99. Or we've got 9 coins. We lost one, but we still have 9. And it's in this context where as Jesus is telling these stories, what is perceived to have little value is what the owner goes in search of. And Jesus is telling these stories as he's sitting at a table full of sinners and tax collectors, as people who are unrighteous, who are lost, who are without God, who don't know him yet. Similarly, in Matthew chapter 9, Jesus is eating at a tax collector's house with many other tax collectors and sinners, this text says, or imperfect people that are joining him. And when the religious people saw him and what Jesus was doing, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus answered them by saying, It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And friends, this is the heart of God that we see in the text revealed in Jesus. Jesus was literally out searching for what or who is lost. Because this is the truth. Jesus pursues what seems of little or no value. This is who Jesus is. This is the heart of God. Jesus pursues what seems of little or no value. Even if it's a little bit broken, even though it might be a little bit less, even though it might be a little bit messy. He pursues what seems to little of no value. I have this reoccurring dream that happens from time to time. I don't know if anybody else have reoccurring dreams? I have reoccurring dreams. And in this dream specifically, I'll be laying in my bed at night. It's weird. In my dream, I'm laying in bed. Okay? So I'm laying in bed in my dream, and all of a sudden my tongue will start wiggling one of my teeth. And then that tooth will get loose. It'll get wiggly. And in my dream, I'll pull it out and be like, oh no, this isn't good. Right? I'm an adult. I've got all my adult teeth, and I just lost a tooth. This is not good. I'm going to have to go see the dentist. And then all of a sudden, another tooth will get wiggly. And I'll be like, not good, right? And then my teeth just start falling out in my mouth. And I've got a mouth full of all of my teeth, and I'm panicking. But I don't want to lose any of my teeth, so I keep them all in my mouth. And I'm running around to different people that I can find in my dream, and I'm going, and then I wake up, right? And I'm like, oh, it was a dream. And then just for kicks, I'll be like, check on my tooth, and it'll start to wiggle. And I'll be like, oh no. And then the next one wiggles, and then they all fall out again, and I'm going, and I'll wake up, and I'll be like, oh, man, that's just a dream. Oh, no, my tooth is wiggling. And literally, this happens 3 or 4 times until I actually wake up. It is the most terrifying dream in the world. I mean, I hate it so much. But Kaylin, she's my daughter who's 8. This be really cool for her. Because right now, she loves losing her teeth. She's got a new wiggly tooth every other week, right? She's pulling them out of her head, check out my tooth, bending it sideways and stuff. She can't wait for the tooth fairy to come, right? She loses a tooth, and man, she'll go upstairs and put it under her pillow, and then the next morning, she comes down, and she's like, the tooth fairy came, and she's all excited about it. In fact, the other day, she lost her tooth at school. We put a little plastic bag, and she lost it, right? It was before bed, and she lost it. And so she's like, I got to find my tooth so I can put it under the pillow. So we're turning the house upside down, looking for this tooth. And we can't find it. I'm like, honey, you're gonna have to go to bed. And it's bedtime. We can't find your tooth. We're going to have to look for it in the morning. It's my tooth. The tooth fairy won't come. And it means nothing to us. It's everything to her. And thankfully, the next morning, I went into her room to get something, and I looked, and in her dollhouse that was up on her shelf that had been on the floor, she had put her tooth in her bag in it, and I had picked it up and put it away, so we lost her tooth. But we found the tooth, and she was so excited. Yeah, I found my tooth. You think about that tooth and why she's excited about it, right? Man, she's got a whole mouthful of teeth. You don't need one tooth. You're never going to use that tooth again. You're never going to be like, okay, time for a picture. Hang on, I got to go get my tooth, right? That's not going to happen. You got a whole mouthful of teeth. You got tooth. That tooth will never chomp on a piece of mac and cheese again, right? That tooth is not important. And while it meant nothing to us, while it wasn't a big deal to us, it was everything to her. And I guess as I think about Kaylin and searching for her one tooth, I think about Jesus sitting there with these tax collectors and sinners all around him, and they're eating together. And he's talking to these religious leaders, and he's telling them about the shepherd that's pursuing this one sheep. And he's kind of like, guys, don't you get it? Right? He's talking about the shepherd pursuing one sheep and the woman pursuing the one coin. And I can't help but think, but if the owner is concerned about these things, if God is concerned with these things, if Jesus is concerned about these things, then shouldn't I be too? Or shouldn't we be too? I mean, look at the shepherd, right, who takes the time to count the sheep. Like, I've been sitting in my tree stand, and a whole herd of deer will come by, and I'm trying to count them as they're coming by. And there'll be like 15 of them. I can't even get to 15, man. I lose count before I get to 15. We got 99 sheep in the field, right? And he's trying to count them, and they're moving all over, right? Getting time of 58, 57, 1, 2, 3, right? But that's not even the amazing part, right? He's counting sheep. How does he not fall asleep? That's what I want to know, all right? That takes effort. And when he discovers that one is missing, he can't help but leave. He's got to go find it, searching the field and the creek bottoms and the hills and the valleys until he finds it. Or think about this poor woman who's lost her coin. She turns on the lights, right? Lighting every lamp that she can. She's sweeping her house and searches carefully around the furniture until she finds it. And if they care that much about these things, how much do you think God cares about the hearts of his people? How much do we care about the hearts of the people around us, about the hearts of God's people? Are we busy searching? Are we busy pursuing, like God, getting into the mess, building relationships with people who might be perceived as a little bit messy, who might be perceived as not quite having it all together, missing out on the life that Jesus offers? Are we pursuing? Are we looking? Do we have that heart, or are we like the religious leaders with our own pursuits elsewhere? Right? Running after all we can get because, hey, we want to look good. What does Jesus value? That's what we see here in this passage. What is Jesus value? What is Jesus like? What is he pursuing? That'd be a good question to ponder this week. What am I pursuing that Jesus values? But it gets better, because if we look at verse 7 and 10 of chapter 15, when the shepherd finds his lost sheep, and the woman finds her lost coin, after they've looked and searched frantically and finally retrieved what was lost, what do? Woo, it's time to get down. They throw a party. They celebrate. It's so good they can't keep it to themselves. They've got to tell people, and they gather folks together, and they're like, rejoice with me, celebrate, let's have a party, because what was once lost is now found. And then Jesus compares that celebration to what happens before God in the heavens. Right, in the presence of, with these angels all around, when just one person who's living a life apart from him turns and embraces who they were made to be in Jesus. Just imagine that. Just think about that for a minute, if you will. All of heaven celebrating and rejoicing over one person who turns to Jesus. One person in all the glory, in all the majesty of what we can imagine heaven to be like, of all the things to celebrate and be joyful over. When a person turns to Jesus, all of heaven stops. And they celebrate. They celebrate. You want to know what Jesus is like? You want to know? You want what Jesus is like? He's crazy about you. Jesus is crazy about you. He celebrates when we turn to him. About 14 years ago, before I met Ashley and all the butterflies and bats and getting sick on the rides, I was living on my own. And I was kind of lonely. So my dad's like, why don't you get a dog? And I was like, great idea, I'll get a dog. So I got this little Brittany Spaniel named Tabby. And she listened most of the time, except when she didn't. And I remember letting her out the back door to, use the bathroom. And it was getting dark. And she goes out, and, a bunny pops up out of the log pile. And I was kind of living in the country, and this bunny takes off through the field. Tabby takes off through the field, and then into the neighbor's yard, and then into the other neighbor's yard, and finally she gets in the wood line, and the whole time I'm running, Tabby, come back here, come back here, because I'm worried she's going to get lost. But it's happened before, so, I was like, oh, here we go, stupid dog. Go get my truck, and I'm driving around the block on these dirt roads, yelling out the window, Tabby, come on, get over here. Come get a treat. Come on. Right? She's not coming. She's not coming. And, normally I would find her in a neighbor's yard, greeting the neighbor. How you doing? Right? Normally I'd find her doing that kind of a thing. I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking, and I'm looking. I'm driving up and down roads, talking to neighbors, wandering through yards. No Tabby, no Tabby, no Tabby. I'm like, it's getting dark. It's getting cold, and I can't see anymore. I'm like, what do I do? So I called up, I'm like, Dad, my dog ran off. Can't find her. I don't know what to do. And he says, well, here's what I'd do. About every hour, I'd just go stand on your back porch and I'd yell. Just call her. So that's what I did, 8 o'clock. Tabby, come get a treat. Good girl, come on, come get a treat. Nothing. 10 o'clock goes by. Get out on the porch. Tabby, come on, get a treat. You get really high, dogs like that. Come on, come get a treat. No dog. 11 o'clock goes by, nothing. Finally, I go to bed, about 12 o'clock, and my mind starts to wander. What if she got hit by a car? If she gets lost and can't find her way home? What if she finds a porcupine? What if she gets, eaten by a coyote? And all these things start to come into my mind. Finally, I fall asleep, and about 2 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I can hear, woof, woof. I'm like, I know that noise. I throw my covers off, and I fly out of bed, and I run to the back door. And there's Tabby, and she's barking at me, and she's so excited to see me. And man, she rolled in something nasty, and she stinks. But I don't care. Man, my dog is there. And I hug her, and I love on her, and I rub her up and down, and I'm like, what did you get into? And she's licking my face, and she smells like death. But I don't care, because my dog has come home, right? Some of us, maybe we've been on a little bit of a tear. Maybe we've been out running around, finding stuff to roll in, right? Doing our own thing, getting into stuff that's a little bit messy, a little bit unhealthy for our mind, body, and soul. Stuff that maybe Jesus wouldn't be getting into. Maybe nobody knows about it, right? Hey, I come to church every Sunday. Nobody knows what's going on. I'm cool. Regardless, and however far away from our Master, from our Jesus that we might find ourselves today, however lax we may have become in our relationship with Him, we can be confident through what we read in these teaching stories and observe Jesus hanging out with those people, right? That God wants nothing more than for us to come home to Him. He doesn't care how we smell. He wants us to come home. He wants us to turn to Him. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter for how long. Just think about this. All of heaven waits in anticipation for you, for me, to turn to Jesus so they can celebrate. Just think about that. And in a moment, I want to extend an invitation. But just real quick as we wrap up, I got one more thing that we see in the text. And it's the joy of those who go searching. Right? Notice Jesus said, suppose one of you, that's what He says. Suppose one of you loses a sheep. Suppose one of you loses a coin. He's talking about us going and searching. And I'd just like to point out real quick, there is nothing quite like the joy that Jesus gives us when we play a role in helping somebody who is maybe lost or a little broken or a little messed up or a little imperfect find their way to Jesus. There's nothing quite like that joy when we help our brother or sister or a friend or a coworker find their way back to Jesus. Not only do they find joy, not only does all of heaven celebrate, but we find joy. We find excitement in being a part of that. God invites us. Jesus invites us to share in that joy. So let's stand. We're just going to recap a bit what we learned about Jesus from this passage. Okay, he welcomes imperfect people. If your life's not together, don't let that keep you from hanging out with Jesus. Don't let that keep you from hanging out with his people. You belong. You belong. Second, Jesus pursues what seems of little or no value, right? So if we're feeling like maybe we're not good enough, or maybe we're not worthy of him, or maybe our life is a little bit too messed up, if that's how we feel, oh, God couldn't love me, God doesn't care about me, I don't even like me, well, I've got news for you. We celebrated and remembered it this morning. To Jesus, you're everything. He cares about you. And then last, I love this one. All of heaven waits. All of heaven waits. Jesus waits in anticipation for us to turn to him. I don't want to keep him waiting.